The food this evening is sponsored anonymously for Refuah Shlema for Baruch Dov Ben Sipora. We have Refuah Shlema. For 40 years, the entire Klal Yisrael were in the Midbar, supported through miracles that were unimaginable and very difficult to even relate to. One of the tremendous nisim was the fact that their food, clothing, whatever their various needs were taken care of. The food was provided by the mun, their clothing did not wear out, their shoes did not wear out, but the water was arguably one of the greatest nisim that was ever experienced by man. For 40 years, a rock, a very, very large rock, followed the entire Jewish nation throughout the Midbar. Now, if you do the math, if there are 600,000 men between the age of 20 and 60, if you add the women, add the younger people under 20, add the people over 60, you have a body of about 3 million individuals. If you're in the desert and an average person needs a half a gallon to a gallon a day, additionally you have many, many sheep, bakar, entire herds of animals, you need somewhere in the vicinity of 11 to 12 million gallons of water a day. Meaning this rock was not a little rock that spouted out a little spigot of water. It was a huge stream of water that was flowing daily, letting out literally millions of gallons, and wherever the Klal Yisrael moved, this rock followed them. Needless to say, it was a phenomenal illustration of Hashem's dominion over every facet of nature. When Miriam died, that be'er stopped. The rock left, it went to hide amongst the other rocks. It would not come out again because the be'er had been with them for 40 years because of the schus of Miriam. Hashem told Moshe and Aaron to go speak to the rock, go tell it to come back out. In fact, that's what happened. Moshe Rabbeinu went out to the rock, spoke to the rock, spoke once, spoke a second time, nothing happened. Finally, Moshe Rabbeinu made a calculation. The first time, 40 years earlier, Hashem told him to take his staff and hit the rock. Must be that it's not sufficient to just speak to the rock, you have to also hit it as I did 40 years earlier. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu hit it once, hit it a second time, and the second time the water began spouting out. Apparently, that was on some level a miscalculation, and because Hashem dons the tzaddikim with a chut asara, with a very precise judgment, Moshe Rabbeinu was held accountable. Apparently there was some element of anger, some infinitesimal shadow of anger that clouded his judgment, that made him make the mistake, and therefore because of that he was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. But the pasuk describes very clearly the following: Vayomer Hashem Moshe v'Aaron yan lo himantim bi lakdisheni. The reason why you are to be punished is because you did not trust in me, lakdisheni, to make a kiddush Hashem le'edim b'nei Yisrael, l'chein lo saviu es hakal hazeh el haaretz asher nasasi lehem. Therefore you will not be zochet to bring the Klal Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. You didn't make the Kiddush Hashem that you could have, that you should have. Therefore you are to be punished. You will not go into Eretz Yisrael. The problem is that obviously Moshe Rabbeinu's mistake is very, very minuscule. But number two, I venture to say that the Kiddush Hashem was rather large. The fact that you go over to a rock and hit it and millions of gallons of water begin coming out is a rather clear demonstration of Hashem's control. So Rashi, being bothered by what was the lack of Kiddush Hashem here, what is the difference if you spoke to the rock or if you hit the rock, granted maybe on some level Moshe Rabbeinu was faulting in his personal midos, but there doesn't seem to be a lack of Kiddush Hashem here. Rashi explains as follows: had you spoken to the rock, had you spoken to the rock and the rock would have been brought forth the water, then Hashem says, I would have been Mekudesh, I would have become holy to the eyes of the entire Eda, and they would have said, look at this rock, this rock doesn't speak and doesn't hear, and doesn't require sustenance, yet it listens to Hashem, meaning Hashem says there is a kal v'chomer that the Klal Yisrael would have made. A rock, an inanimate object, that doesn't need sustenance, doesn't need a parnasa, yet it listens to Hashem, kal v'chomer, us, surely we who need sustenance, need michya, surely we should listen to Hashem. That Kiddush Hashem was lacking, that lesson was lacking, the Klal Yisrael didn't get that element, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was punished. And that's the Rashi, and that's the Pasuk. And I'd like to ask what I consider to be a rather obvious question on this Rashi, and the truth be told, it's three obvious questions. The first one is that there is a concept that we're all familiar with, and that is schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka. There is no reward for mitzvahs given out in this world. This world's currency is too fleeting, too passing. The value of a mitzvah is so great, so eternal, that the only place that mitzvahs are given a reward for is in the world to come. So what is the kal v'chomer that the Klal Yisrael would have made? They would have said as follows: my goodness, the rock doesn't need a parnasa, yet it listens to Hashem. Surely we better listen to Hashem. Now that's patently false. The reason you listen to Hashem or don't listen to Hashem is not because you need a parnasa. There is no reward in this world for your mitzvahs. It's not like you do a mitzvah and Hashem rewards you with money, a car, a house. That's not the system. You do mitzvahs in this world, the reward for it is not in this world, it's in the world to come. So the very kal v'chomer that the Klal Yisrael would have or should have made seems to be faulty. But I think there's a second question which is equally difficult. And to explain that question, I'd like to share with you an interesting experience I had as a high school Rebbe. When I was teaching 11th grade in Rochester, there was one fellow in the shir who was very, very tough. He was one of the cooler kids and had a really tough exterior. Baruch Hashem, he was doing pretty well. He was learning. But there were definitely issues. I was on the phone one evening with his father, and we were discussing strategies, what could be done, etc. And his father said, well, why don't we do the following? How about if he learns for a certain amount of time, you give him some kind of reward? So I said, okay, fine, what do you have in mind? So his father said, well, maybe like if he learns for a week or two, you buy him an ice cream. I said, what? I said, yeah, if he learns for a week or two, you'll buy him an ice cream. And I said, what? What do you say? And it took me another moment to put it all together. The gentleman I was speaking to was a first grade Rebbe. The currency in first grade is you learn for a week or two, the Rebbe buys you an ice cream, wow, it's great, it works. But with a 17-year-old, it doesn't really work. It's not exactly the currency that a tough 11th grader is going to be impressed with. And the moral of the story is that before you go offering rewards, you had better know the currency of the people to whom you're speaking. My friends, it would be very difficult for us to imagine the ruchnius level, the spiritual level of the Jewish nation at this point. Every man, woman, and child had experienced Hashem clearly right in front of them. The greatest Navi had a clarity of vision that paled in comparison to what the simplest maidservant saw at Kabbalas HaTorah, saw at Kriyas Yamsuf. They saw Hashem, they heard Hashem, they reached a level that was hard to envision or imagine. But that was some 40 years earlier. That generation who had left Mitzrayim, had experienced this tremendous height, had basically died out in the Midbar. We're talking almost at the end of 40 years. The Jewish nation as a unit for the past 40 years have been engaged in one activity primarily, and that's called Limud HaTorah. They were in the Midbar, they didn't have to work for a living, there was no business, there was no commerce, there were no merchants, there was nothing to do other than learn, than grow. This was the virtual Beis Medrash, the ultimate kollel community. This was a nation that was on such a peak, such a height, that it is very difficult to imagine their ruchnius level. And you say to Moshe Rabbeinu as follows: Moshe Rabbeinu, you blew it. Had you only taught them this lesson, it would have changed their life. What's the lesson? That you should serve Hashem because you need money. You should serve Hashem because you need a house. You should serve Hashem because you need shoes, you need a car, you need furniture. Number one, it's not true. Number two, that's the wrong currency for this population. These people aspire for greatness. This generation aspires for perfection. To tell them, serve Hashem because you'll get parnasa. Look at the rock. The rock doesn't even need parnasa, yet it listens to Hashem. Surely I, who need a living, surely I should listen to Hashem. That's not the motivational system for this generation. And the third question, I think, is also important, and that is that there was nothing that they could have learned from the rock. Either they knew it, or they couldn't have learned it. You see, a rock doesn't talk, and a rock doesn't tell over anything. Either they understood that Hashem runs the world and Hashem has certain systems, or they didn't. But there's no chiddush in the rock. You see, the rock is an inanimate object that Hashem controls, Hashem forces, and there's no chiddush that you could learn from the rock. If you know that Hashem runs the world and gives out parnasa, is in charge of how much money you make, you know that already. If you don't know that, the rock isn't going to teach you that. Therefore, there doesn't seem to be anything they could have learned from the rock. And this Rashi seems to be rather difficult to understand. So I'd like to see this evening if we could break down these concepts a bit and get a better understanding of exactly what it is that Rashi is teaching us. And to do that, I'd like to begin with the following observation. I believe that what I'd call the mitzvah of our generation is kiruv rechokim. We live in a time where 90% of our people are very, very far away, but not in any sense rejecting, not in any sense argumentative, not in any sense not interested. 90% of our people are so abysmally ignorant but hungry, thirsty for knowledge, that kiruv is such an unbelievable opportunity in our days. And you see in so many different venues, in so many different ways, Jews reaching out and bringing large numbers back, that it is arguably the mitzvah of our generation. Now, in the world of kiruv, there are basically two systems that are used. Two basic approaches in kiruv. The first basic approach is what I call meaning in life. When you wake up at 40 years of age and you say to yourself, okay, I got it, doing well, got a career, got a family, but what's it about? What's the meaning of it all? What's the purpose of it all? What am I living for? And even better, when you're making a lot of money and you're very successful and people are speaking about you and your reputation spreads and you wake up at 45 or 50 and you say to yourself, so what? I feel so empty, so purposeless, so meaningless. My life has no value. That is the neshama, the very deeply rooted part of I that needs meaning, that needs purpose, that knows that I was put on this planet for real, true meaning. And that part will never be satisfied with anything that you'll bring it from this world. That part needs to really accomplish, to do. And that is one of the greatest tools in kiruv, when you speak to that inner need in the human for purpose, for meaning, for greatness. And that is a very effective system. However, there's a whole other way to be involved in kiruv that has nothing to do with that. And that second way, I'd like to illustrate to you by something that I just, 2 weeks ago, I spoke at there was a Shabbaton here in Monsey. The University of Albany Jewish Experience was here, and the person who was running it, Hanan Rosenblum, invited me to speak Friday night. So I came there for davening, and it was a beautiful Karbach davening, and it's very interesting to watch the 18, 19-year-old college students as they pick up the siddur and they're not sure which end, which way, or page, and you could see we're dealing with some really raw individuals who haven't had much exposure. Davening is beautiful. After the meal, I get up to speak, and I do my little piece, and I'm done, and then I sit down. And I wanted to stay a little bit longer to get a flavor for what happens next, where's this program going. So Rabbi Hanani Rosenblum gets up and he introduces the next speaker. The next speaker, he says, is Rabbi Yaakov Daniel. I never heard of Rabbi Yaakov Daniel, but apparently some of the fellas around the table did. And then he goes into the kitchen and he brings out a bottle of Jack Daniels, Rabbi Yaakov Daniel. I go, He said, of course, Rabbi Yaakov Daniel sometimes gets abused. We can't abuse him, but we have to properly use him. Here's the rules, guys. You're entitled to a drink, but you got to pay for it. How do you pay for it? You have to say something from the heart. And that was the rule. Anybody wanted a shot, had to get up and say something from the heart, and their schar was an introduction to Rabbi Yaakov Daniel. Now, one of the interesting parts about this was that Jack Daniels is a rather strong drink, and it was the young ladies who were volunteering first. And my wife was there, and on the women's side, someone said something like, well, why don't you offer some ladies' drinks? And they didn't cop the fact that the girls were first volunteering, and they pick it up. I said, we're dealing with a different generation. Okay. Student after student gets up and says something, takes a drink, sits down. There are about 20, 25 students. And after a while, it began hitting me that almost every one of them began with an interesting sort of prelude. They would begin by saying, I just want to say how special it is to me to be here, how warm I feel, the hosts who have taken us in, the fact that they've opened their houses to us, and I just want to let you know how welcome I feel here. And I realized something very, very interesting. You see, this Shabbaton was housed in our local neighborhood. 2 students would sleep in one house, 2 students in another house. The meals were held in one person's house, davening in another person's house. And what I recognized was that something that we take so for granted is not so simple. Baruch Hashem, we enjoy a very tight-knit community. And while there are many issues that we have to deal with, and I'm sure there are many things that we could improve upon, the reality is if you open a local Monsey newspaper and you see an entire page of classified ads that are advertising as gemachs, that means somebody paid money to put an ad in the paper to ask you to borrow there, and you'll see whatever the gemachs are. Some for bris equipment, some for baby equipment, some for whatever you can imagine. You're having a bar mitzvah, you need sidurim, there's a gemach for that. Whatever you can imagine, whatever you could need, there's a Gemilas Chesed fund that somebody set up, that somebody monitors, that somebody makes sure is there and available. And when you're from the outside and you come in and you see people graciously open their homes without a question, they welcome you and then they bring you in, what you understand is that there's a frum community, there's an openness, there's a oneness to this that is very unique, very special, and isn't out there. And my friends, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. If you want to do something in the world of Kiruv, invite a non-religious Jew to your house for Shabbos. Bring them into a Shabbos meal. You don't have to be a Kiruv professional. You don't have to have all the philosophical answers, because very few people are that philosophical. But when they see warmth, when they see beauty, when they see a family, an intact family. By the way, an intact family means the same husband married to the same wife for 20 years, 30 years, same husband, same wife, 6 kids. What? All from one wife. First marriage, 25 years, 6. I've never seen that before. Is that? Are there others like you here? Wow, shit. I've never heard of that. I didn't even know it existed anymore. And when they see kids at the Shabbos table talking to their parents with respect, all right, not always with the greatest level of derech eretz that we would like, but there's a commonality, there's interest, there's a unit, there's a beauty to our community and our family life. It is one of the most powerful Kiruv tools in existence. So if the first system of Kiruv is purpose and meaning, real emes, the second one is a sense of belonging, a sense of community. But I believe that there's a third system for Kiruv that's extraordinarily unknown in the Kiruv world and unknown in the Frum world. And I'd like to share with you this evening what that third system is. When Moshe Rabbeinu was approached by Hashem with the following proposition, the Klal Yisrael blew it. The Chet HaEgel was so serious, such an egregious sin, that Hashem said, I'm going to destroy the Klal Yisrael and I'm going to begin it again from you. Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem as follows, Nechaneni na misifracha. If you want to do that, that's fine. Erase me from your book. I won't be a part of it. The name Moshe Rabbeinu should be cut out of the Sefer Torah. I'm not a part of it. I'm not participating. Moshe Rabbeinu flatly refused. And Moshe Rabbeinu succeeded in saving the entire Jewish nation. Apparently, not only did Moshe Rabbeinu succeed, but what he did found tremendous favor in Hashem's eyes. Because ultimately that is what Hashem wanted. And ultimately, what Moshe Rabbeinu did was the greatest self-sacrifice of any human being ever. And when he Kaviyachol convinced Hashem to save the Klal Yisrael, it was an Eis Rotzon. He had accomplished something that no other human being had, and Moshe Rabbeinu understood that the doorways were open. He now could ask for anything he wanted. And at this moment, the Gemara Bracha says that he asked the question that had been plaguing him for years. He asked the tema, the tremendous kasha that he never could find an answer to, and this was the kasha. His kasha was, Hashem, tzaddik v'tovlo, I understand, but tzaddik v'ralo, how could it be that a tzaddik could be having it bad in this world? And he had another kasha, Rosh v'ralo, a wicked person who has a bad olam hazeh, I get it, I understand it. But how could you have a Rosh, a wicked person, having a good life? This was the philosophical tema, the tremendous kasha that Moshe Rabbeinu had for years. And during this Eis Rotzon, he asks it to Hashem, and Hashem answers it. What is the answer? Hashem says, the tzaddik who has it bad in this world is a tzaddik who's not a tzaddik gomer, meaning there's some element, something that he did at some point that he deserves punishment for, rather than waiting for Olam Haba where the punishment is much more severe, much more permanent. Hashem says, let me have rachamim, let me give him the punishment here, let him suffer here, it's short, it's quick, and it's over. The Rosh who's having a good life here did something good. Hashem says, rather than pay him back for eternity, let me pay him back here. And that's the answer. But gentlemen, here's the question I'd like to ask on that Gemara. And that question is that this is basic philosophy. The question that Moshe Rabbeinu had is not a big tema. The answer is not a big chiddush. If you open up a Chovos HaLevavos, it's something that's discussed over and over and over again. We know that we're created for a few short years. We have a mission, we have a plan, we have a purpose. This world is fleeting, it's passing. If you're a tzaddik, you'll have sometimes suffering in this world. Why? Sometimes it's because you need it for your growth. Sometimes it's a punishment for what you've done wrong. But these are not big temas. Yet one of the wisest men who ever lived, the Av B'Chochma, in the Eis Rotzon, the moment when he has Hashem's ear, asked this huge kasha, how could it be that a tzaddik has it bad? And I'd like to share with you why I believe Moshe Rabbeinu asked that kasha. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Tes, explains to us something very, very important. He says, when we read Shema and we say the words, rain in its time, fruitful produce, L'man yirbu yemechem, all of the great brachas that the Klal Yisrael have promised happen when the entire Jewish nation as a unit are doing what we're supposed to, and we're living in Eretz Yisrael. When we as a people, when we as a nation are doing what we're supposed to, we're exalted, we're mighty, we live a beautiful, productive life. There will not be any miscarriages, not amongst our women nor amongst our cattle. We'll have tremendous prosperity, tremendous bracha. We won't have sickness. We will have tremendous health, and all of the brachas will be delivered. However, that is specifically when we have the entire Klal Yisrael serving Hashem and we're living in Eretz Yisrael. But, says the Rambam, make no mistake, even a yachid, even a single individual, if he serves Hashem well, if he's faithful and he devotes himself to serve Hashem, the Rambam says he will get a very prosperous olam hazeh. He will have a very easy time in this world. Why? Not because of reward for his mitzvahs, but rather because Hashem says, Kaviyachol, I created you to grow. I created you to do mitzvahs. If you're going to be the type of person who'll use this world appropriately, I'm going to make it easy for you. You'll have an easy time earning a living, because then you'll have more time for learning, more time for chesed. I'm going to make it easy for you. You're not going to have to suffer, because then you'll be able to dedicate yourself more to your purpose in creation, namely mitzvahs, serving Hashem. Says the Rambam, if any individual dedicates himself towards avodas Hashem, it's a guarantee that you'll have a better olam hazeh. Your world here, your livelihood, your health, your success in every endeavor under the sun will be greater. It'll be easier for you, not as reward for your mitzvahs, but rather because Hashem says it's a good deal. I put you on the planet to grow. If I give you more time, you'll grow more, you'll serve me more. It's here, it's yours, you'll have an easier time. Now, this, my friends, may not be as basic to us as other concepts, but I want you to hear well Moshe Rabbeinu's tema. He understood this concept so clearly that when he saw a tzaddik suffering, he said the words, how could it be? How could a tzaddik have a tough time making a living? How could it be that a tzaddik is sickly? How could he be suffering? He has stomach pains, he has ailments, he has arthritis. How is it possible? It was a tema, it was such a question on the entire system that this was the question that Moshe Rabbeinu asked to Hashem, because Moshe Rabbeinu understood that this is the system via which Hashem runs the world. And that system is that if you use this world appropriately, Hashem gives you bracha, Hashem gives you prosperity, Hashem gives you success. And when Moshe Rabbeinu saw the opposite, it was a tremendous kasha. And this, my friends, I believe is the answer to Rashi and the Kal Vachomer. You see, Schar Mitzvah B'Hayalma Leka is correct. There is no reward for your mitzvahs in this world. But if you do what you're supposed to, Hashem says it's a good deal for me to give you more, because now you'll dedicate yourself more to Avodas Hashem, and that's exactly the lesson that the Klal Yisrael didn't get. Had Moshe Rabbeinu spoken to the rock instead of hitting it, the Klal Yisrael would have made the following Kal Vachomer. Oh my goodness, a rock doesn't need parnasa. It doesn't need sustenance, it doesn't need to make a livelihood, yet it listens to Hashem. Surely I need a livelihood, I need so much. Surely I should listen to Hashem. Why? Not because Hashem will reward me for my mitzvahs, but because if I listen to Hashem, if I serve Hashem, Hashem will take care of me. Why? Because then I'll be more able to dedicate myself to learning, to growing, to chesed, to everything I should be doing. That was a tremendous lesson that the Klal Yisrael didn't get, and they should have gotten. And my friends, this lesson, I believe, is a very big deal. Because if we ever got this for real, I believe it would change radically the way we serve Hashem, and radically the way we live our lives. On a simple level, imagine the following. My uncle owns a Fortune 500 company. Imagine for a moment, my uncle is very, very wealthy, and he owns one of the large corporations. And he says to me as follows. He says, Yingala, listen, I want you to work for me. I'm not sure what you want to do. You just pick any job. As long as you're working and you're industrious, you'll have a job. I just want you to learn the ropes, and eventually, we'll see where we'll put you. Needless to say, my job security, my understanding of my position there at work would be very different than if my uncle didn't own this large corporation. But the reality is that if I ever got it, that my parnasa, my sustenance, is directly decided by Hashem. On Rosh Hashanah, it's set exactly how much money I am to make. I have to do my shtadlis. My job is to get out there and work and do a regular olam hazeh type of shtadlis, a derech hateva, a way of nature shtadlis. But I'm working for my very, very rich uncle. It's my creator who guarantees me my parnasa. I got to go out and do my job. I have to be diligent. I have to be straightforward and honest. But at the end of the day, my parnasa is taken care of. I believe that we'd be a little bit different in the way we act, in the nervousness, the anxiety. Oh my goodness, the economy, it's crashing, it's a recession, it's a depression. Oh my goodness, I'm going to die. Oh. I guess you're right. If it's you earning your daily bread, if it's you running the world, you're in big trouble. Because there ain't nothing you're going to do about it. I mean, the economy is heading south, and there ain't nothing, you're not going to turn it around. There's just no hope. But you see, my friends, that's exactly the point. If it's me running the world, if it's me earning my parnasa, I'm in big trouble. But that's exactly the fallacy. And once I begin getting it, that Hashem created the world and Hashem runs the world, and is a very exact system. If I'm dedicated to serving Hashem, then Hashem guarantees me, I'll take care of you. You'll have a better time in this world. You'll have more success. You'll have an easier time of it. You ever notice sometimes you're pulling out of your driveway and you smack into something, and you turn around and you say, oh my goodness, it's a car. Oh, I can't believe how stupid. You get out and you see there's no damage. Hit the bumper, your bumper against his bumper. It was a solid shot. No damage because you hit bumper to bumper. Then another time you get out, same sort of shot, but it's not bumper to bumper. You hit his side of his fender and you did $2,000-$3,000 worth of damage. There are many, many things in life that happen. Many, many successes, many, many failures. If I were to ever get this single lesson, that if I serve Hashem, not as reward, but as a system to allow me to better serve Hashem, Hashem says, I'll take care of you. Your successes will be more successful. Your failures will not be as deep. You won't have to worry about health. You won't have to worry about all of the myriad issues that you have to deal with. I'm in charge. If I would ever get that single point straight, I believe my life would be different. And I believe that this yesod is a tremendous, tremendous yesod. And while you may not be able to easily sell it in a kiruv setting, for us it is should be a tremendous motivator towards working on my midos, towards working on my frumkeit, towards working on my learning. However, there's a second question that we asked. And the second question that we asked was, this is the wrong currency. You're talking to the Dor Deya. You're talking to the generation that lived with such tremendous clarity of understanding. They saw Hashem right there. They saw Kabbalah Satorah, and if they didn't see it because they were too young, they heard it from their father. They were learning in this ultimate kollel lifestyle for the past 40 years. You don't talk about ice cream to this group. But my friends, I believe there too there's a tremendous lesson for us. Imagine the following. Imagine you're over here, two ladies having a conversation. One woman says to her friend, your son would do very well in this yeshiva. I know your son, I know this yeshiva, and this is the right place for him. And the second woman says, well, maybe you're right, but I refuse to send my son there. I'm not doing it. Why? I heard the boys smoke. I don't want my kid hanging out in that kind of crowd. I don't want him picking that habit up. I'm not sending him. If you were to overhear that conversation, you'd probably say, well, okay, I hear what she's saying. Maybe she's right, maybe she's wrong, I don't know. But it's a acceptable position. Let's take the same scenario, but a slightly different conversation. I think you really should send your son to that yeshiva. It's really good for him. And the second woman says, well, I would do it, but I'm not doing it. Why not? Why not? I heard they speak Lashon Hara in that yeshiva. I'm not doing it. Lady, what are you, crazy? Yeah, some of the 15 and 16-year-old boys, they talk Lashon Hara. I'm not sending my son there. Lady, what planet are you coming from? But my friends, I want you to hear well what I'm saying to you. If you'd ask anyone who really understands life, what is more damaging to your health? Picking up a lifelong habit of smoking cigarettes or picking up a lifelong habit of speaking Lashon Hara, I guarantee you, speaking Lashon Hara is far more dangerous, far more damaging, and you have guarantee after guarantee in the Torah that you will live a shorter life. You have guarantee after guarantee that you will be punished. You could violate 36 separate assays and los assays just with this Lashon Hara. The most you're ever going to get with smoking might be a mitzvah assay, and it might even be debatable, and then it might be only cumulative after a few years, but it's certainly not every single dibur, 3, 4, 5 los assays. There's no question that if you really understand life, you understand that Lashon Hara is far more damaging, far more dangerous. So why is it that you would never have a conversation with a woman saying, I'm not sending my son there because they speak Lashon Hara? The answer is because one's real and the other one isn't. You see, when you go to the cancer ward, when you see someone who has emphysema and you see the ravages to their lungs, you quickly understand that this is something that's extremely real. But Lashon Hara, I don't know, it's a los asay, I'm not sure, I don't see it, I don't feel it, I can't touch the damage. My friends, I want you to hear well what I'm saying. This generation, as great as they were also real live human beings. And a real live human being who has a need, who needs to make a living, is very, very driven, very motivated. And Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, if it could be, there was something that you blew. They could have gained, they could have gotten a tremendous amount of chizuk out of. And what's that? This understanding their parnasa is dependent upon Hashem. Had they understood this rock, this inanimate object that doesn't need parnasa listens to Hashem, surely I who need a parnasa surely should listen to Hashem, that would have spoken to them. Why? Because any human being who's made of flesh and blood needs various things. One of those things is a livelihood, and you could be on the highest madriga. You could be on the greatest level. That need is real, that need is powerful, and once you get it, that the system works, Hashem guarantees if you serve me, if you dedicate yourself to me, you're going to get a parnasa. Then you also understand that is one of the most motivating forces in the world. Now, you may say to me, that's interesting, but so what? Let me share with you what I mean. It was a Rosh Hashanah night when I was walking back, and I passed the largest and busiest parking lot in all of Rochester. It was the parking lot for one of the local temples, and needless to say, Rosh Hashanah is a very busy time, so the parking lot was filled and the parking lot was being emptied back and forth. As I'm walking past, I see one couple, youngish sort of couple. They leave the temple and they get into the car, and I wanted to cry out. I said to myself, I can't believe it. What if I had a lot of money? And what if I went over to them and said, sir, I promise you, I guarantee you, if you'll just keep this day, don't violate the day called Rosh Hashanah, I promise you I'll give you $1 million cash, no strings attached. What do you think would happen? Now, my assumption is that if they were to believe me, if they would take me at my word, then my assumption is that what would happen would be they would immediately walk the 2.5 miles home. They wouldn't turn on the TV, because after all, at the end of the day, $1 million is a significant amount of cash, and somehow I could get by the day. My friends, what I'm saying to you is as follows. What the Rambam is telling us, what this Rashi is telling us is, my olam hazeh, forget the world to come, forget meaning in life, forget community, forget all of that stuff. If you want to enjoy your stay on this planet, serve Hashem. You will not get reward for your mitzvahs. You will not be paid back for your mitzvahs. But if you're that type of person, Hashem guarantees, Hashem created the system, Hashem runs the system in a way that Hashem guarantees, if you do this, I'll pay you back. Not schar, not reward, but I'll allow you to further serve me. I'll allow you to do more mitzvahs, and your olam hazeh will be much greater. This concept, my friends, is a very, very big deal. It won't make it in the kiruv world. You will not be able to go out there on the college campuses and sell this. But for us, I believe it is a major, major issue and a major, major concept to understand. And now we come to the topic of this evening's discussion. And that is the title of the shmooze. The title of the shmooze this evening is April 15th, the Test of Emunah. And the reason why I named this shmooze with that title is because I think it is very apt and very appropriate. Let me share with you what I mean. A while back we had a Bukharian fellow over who was then, I'm not sure if he is now, certainly then he was not fully Shomer Shabbos. And at the Shabbos table, he told an interesting story. He said as follows. He said, he's a physical therapist. Now, a physical therapist earns as much as your work. It's per case you're paid. And he was grappling with the issue of keeping Shabbos. On the one hand, he wanted to keep Shabbos. On the other hand, he wasn't sure if he could afford it or not. Now, he works with geriatric patients, and he was telling me that the work that he does is really remarkable. He takes a person who had a stroke, and basically he helps them regain their mobility. They're in bed, they can't walk, they can't even go to the bathroom, and through the physical therapy, he gives them back their life. Anyway, he went through the back and forth. He finally decided, that's it, I'm keeping Shabbat. And then he stopped working on Shabbat, realizing that it's going to cost him quite a bit of money. He said a very interesting thing happened. No sooner did he make that decision than some of his patients started giving him envelopes. And they would say to him something like this, you helped me out. I couldn't walk. I couldn't go to the bathroom. You changed my life. This is for you. And he'd open the envelope and he'd find cash in it. And it wasn't one patient, but a number of patients. And he said, amazingly, whatever money that he didn't receive because of work, he got back from his patients giving him tips. Okay, it was a beautiful story. I felt it was heartwarming, and I thought it was very nice. But I also realized that's something we're pretty comfortable with. If you've been from long enough, you're comfortable with that idea. The Chofetz Chaim tells us that the amount of money a person's given, Hashem sets, it's like a barrel. You have this much wine in your barrel. If there are 6 spigots, you're going to get that much wine out. If you put a 7th spigot, you're still going to get that same amount of wine. The amount of money you're going to make this year is set 6 days a week, 7 days a week. That's your choice, but you're not going to get more wine. That's a concept that we as Frum Jews are pretty comfortable with. And for most of us, working on Shabbos is not an assignment. Okay, but what about business? What about business when it's a little shading of the truth? Not even a full bald-faced lie, but just a little dray, and it means a huge difference. And what about a little diversion from absolute emes that'll save you $35,000 on your tax return? Come on, that's pushing. I mean, like, that's, I mean, granted, it's a lie. I know it. My tax preparer knows it. But it's a lot of money, And at that stage, I think a lot of times we very, very pious, very, very religious, very, very big Bali B'tochen, become a little different in the way we think and the way we approach situations. I would like to give you what I consider the most apt mushal I could think of for that situation. The next time you're in downtown Manhattan, somewhere on one of the avenues, and you pull up to the red light, and the hot rod pulls up next to you, and you look over and you see the kid, and the light turns green, and he zooms out. You're going about your business. He goes left, he goes right, in, out, out. 3 blocks later, you catch up to him at the red light. Light turns green. 3 blocks later, you catch up to him at the next red light, and you go through from one end of the island to the other, and he hasn't gotten anywhere. My friends, this concept that if I get it, if I understand that Hashem sets the amount of money I'm to make on Rosh Hashanah, then I also understand you can't cheat the system. It can look like you're going very fast. Vroom. It could look like you're cutting ahead of so many people, getting ahead. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up at the same red light at the same time you're supposed to, because it's not your world. You didn't create the world, you don't run the world, and you don't determine how much money you're going to make this Rosh Hashanah. Now, with that being said, I have a little questionnaire that I like to give out that I believe helps people deal with this great test of Emunah, April 15th. You see, April 15th is the great test of Emunah because, again, no one sees. No one really knows how much money I make. I got a cash business. As a matter of fact, no one in the world knows how much money I take in. I sit there at the register. Some things I ring up, some things I don't. I pay all of my bills in cash. There ain't no one in the world who is ever going to know how much money I make or don't make. And then I come to that one little line at the end of the return that reads as follows. On the penalties of perjury, I declare that I've examined this return and accompanying schedules and statements, and to the best of my knowledge and belief, they are true, correct, and complete. And then I sign my name on that. So before you fill out your taxes, hopefully there's enough time, I'd like to share with you 3 questions on this little questionnaire that I believe will make it much easier. The first question is as follows. Question number 1 is, how much money does God have? I think it's a rather reasonable question. How much money does Hashem have? Okay, now let's do a quick calculation. Hashem owns diamond mines in South Africa. Hashem has land holdings in Manhattan, some oil wells in Saudi Arabia. In short, the gross national product of planet Earth belongs to Hashem. A lot of money, enough money to take care of you, enough money to take care of me. Okay, but you'll say to me, well, that's very clever, very cute. Hashem has a lot of money, but I don't care how much money Hashem has. I care about how much money He's giving to me, and how much money this year. Okay, so let's come to question number 2. When Hashem determines this year how much money I'm to make, is that amount before taxes or after taxes? You hear the question? Hashem determines that this year I'm going to make $50,000, $500,000, $5 million, whatever the number is that number before taxes or after taxes? Meaning, do I have the right to assume that Hashem is aware of the federal, state, local tax obligations? Do I have the right to assume that Hashem knows how things really work in this real world? Or maybe not. Maybe Hashem is unaware. And therefore really Hashem wants me to have a lot of money, and Hashem doesn't know that there's this onerous tax rate, and I got to pay 38%, and after I have sales tax. If Hashem would know that, He would never give me that little. So that's the second question. Is the amount set before taxes or after taxes? But I think the third question is the most important one. And that third question goes something like this. Do I have a right to assume that Hashem says as follows? Yingala, I would like you to have a lot of money. In fact, I've granted you this year a tremendous amount of money. But that's only provided that you lie, steal, and cheat. If you're going to be a nar and be honest, forget it, the deal's off. If you're going to be honest and tell the truth and do I'm not going to give, no way. You're not going to get money then. I I was only going to give you bracha and a tremendous if you're going to lie and steal, but if you're going to be an honest nar, forget it. You see, I think when you ask these three questions, what you come to is a very different perspective. And that perspective is that the 1040 is a test of emunah. You see, it tests very dramatically my belief system. Do I really believe the words that I utter? I utter the words that Hashem created the world, runs the world. Hashem determines how much money I make. Do I really believe it, or is it a game? Now, if I really believe it, then I do what an honest, ethical person does. I pay exactly the amount of tax I'm supposed to. Not a penny more, but not a penny less. And that means if there's a legal loophole, you use it, you scrutinize, you get a very wise tax advisor to tell you what you're obligated to pay. You don't pay a penny more, but you don't pay a penny less. But you see, that's yashrus, that's emes. But more than that, that's called emunah. Emunah means knowing that it's not my world. I didn't create the world, I don't run the world, and I also understand that I'm much like that fellow, the hot rodder, and when the red light turns green and I'm rushing out, my little tricks, my little nuances, my little drays sound creative, sound clever, but they're not going to get me any further. The question is, do I sincerely believe that which I say? I think there's a tremendous lesson to learn from this chazal, and that is that the Dor Deah, as great as they were, needed this very powerful lesson. The powerful lesson is your michyar, your livelihood is dependent upon Hashem. So what you'll say, there's no schar in this world? So what means because your livelihood is dependent on Hashem? If you serve Hashem, if you trust in Hashem, if you do what you're supposed to, Hashem says, I'll take care of you. That's the deal. If you use your time appropriately, then you'll have grand success. But if you don't, you're going to suffer. You want to hear a chazal? It's a very frightening chazal. The Gemara tells us that every single place, you find it in the Torah, you find it repeated in every part of Shas, you find it repeated over and over, that if a person is osuk baraisa, if a person is involved in Torah, nechasav matzlichin, his nechasim, his commerce, his business finds success. But what that means in plain language is you got to take the first step. You have to say to yourself, listen, I got to work a long, hard day. And whether it's 60 hours a week, 70 hours or 80 hours a week, I don't have time to learn. And the idea of joining a kol boker, the idea of setting every night to learn is something that's well beyond what I could do. It may be true, but it may not be. And if a person is able to say, I get it, I was created for a purpose, and I'm going to take that very bold step forward. I'm going to set my schedule with this as a priority. I'm going to join a kol boker or a night program. I'm going to learn, I'm going to set time, and I trust that Hashem will reward me. The Gemara guarantees you will have more success, your business will succeed, your situation will get better, and the reason is quite obvious. The reason is because that's what Hashem wants. Hashem didn't create us because He needs cows to work the field. Hashem didn't create man poor because Hashem couldn't figure out how to support him. Hashem put us on this planet, and the Rambam says there's a guarantee. If you use your time appropriately, Hashem will make it easier for you, and that's something that the Dor Deah needed to hear. And as great as they were, knowing that their livelihood was dependent on Hashem was something that changed their perspective, something that gave them a different understanding, and something that because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't show them, was something that was lacking in them. I'd like to close with what I consider a very classic example of this, something the Gemara Brachas brings down with the mice of a chassid. Now, keep in mind, in the time of the Gemara, a chassid was an extraordinarily pious, very great individual. One day, the Brisa tells us, this chassid was davening on the road, and a Roman Tsar, a Roman officer, very important person, stopped. V'nasan lo shalom, gave shalom to him, said hi. This chassid was davening, and the chassid didn't return the shalom, kept davening, didn't stop his davening. This Tsar, this noble, waited. When the chassid finished davening, the Tsar walked over to him and said, you know, I said hello to you and you didn't greet me back. Do you know that by all right I should kill you on the spot? And not only should I kill you on the spot, if I were to murder you here, who would be Toveya Yodam? Who would demand vengeance? No one. No one would stop me. No one would demand vengeance. I should do that to you right now. At which point the Brisa says, this chassid turned to the nobleman and said, give me a moment, let me appease you. Let me ask you the following question, says this chassid. Let's say you were speaking to a king. Let's say you were speaking to a king, and during that conversation a friend of yours came over to you. What would you do? Would you turn to your friend and say hello? The Sar said, of course not. And what if the man said hello? Would you return the hello? Of course I wouldn't. And what if you were to return the hello? What would the king do? And the Sar said, if I would do that, the king would kill me. So the chassid said, well, sir, with all due respect, I was speaking to the King of Kings. You came over and said hello. Should I ignore the King of Kings and say hello to you? Immediately, says the Gemara, immediately Nispayes, the Sar was appeased and he left B'Shalom. But here's the problem with that Gemara. What I left out was one thing that the Sar said to the chassid. As soon as the chassid took his 3 steps back after the Shemona Esrei, the Sar quoted a pasuk. He said, your Torah says the word Ushmartem es nafshoseichem. Your Torah says you should guard your life. You're not keeping your Torah. Why is that significant, my friends? Because this Sar was very learned. This wasn't the first time he met this chassid. He knew of him, and at this time the Romans, many of the Romans, this was pre-Christianity, spreading the religion of enlightenment. The religion that was coveted was a Jewish religion, and many Romans studied it, and this Sar was a Talmud. He had learned from Tanaim, he understood much, he quoted Psukim verbatim, and he understood the minute this man said to him, I was talking to the King of Kings, immediately Nispayes, immediately he became appeased. So here's the question. If this Sar understood that this chassid is davening to Hashem, if he understood the pasuk, what was the chiddush? What changed? He knew beforehand the man was talking to God. And what changed that all of a sudden, a moment ago, the Sar was going to kill him, and now he becomes appeased? And the answer, my friends, is nothing changed, but there was a little change in perspective. When the chassid said to him, I was talking to a king. Don't you understand? If you were talking to a mortal king, you never would turn away. If I was talking to the King of Kings, there was a reality set in. Oh my goodness, I get it. Hashem is the king. Oh, I'm sorry. There was no chiddush, nothing novel in understanding, no new concept, but a different perspective. He got it. And the reason I share that with you is because if we Jews were to get this single concept, forget Olam Haba, forget meaning and purpose, forget all of the various reasons that typically a person is from, Rambam's saying that if you want to enjoy this world, if you want to have success, if you want to have parnasa, if you want to have health, if you want to have all of the brachas that the Torah guarantees, the Rambam says you'll get it. Not as reward, not as schar, but you'll get it because Hashem says you're the person who's roy for it, you're the person who's worthy for it, you'll use your time more effectively, more efficiently. It's a tremendous deal. If I could ever get that perspective, needless to say, April 15th would not be in the Zion. Cheating in general would not be in the Zion, but more than that, my whole focus in life would be different. May Hashem grant us wisdom, understanding, and ability to put this into practice.